Welcome, Scott. There he is.
How's it going?
What's happening? Good to have you back.
Yeah, good to be back. And by the way, I love David Tenra. It's so fun to be on back to back with him.
I
I
know.
love I love the story of recruiting and truly just fighting for the best people. I've always felt the same way, which is, people always ask about evaluating talent, which is of course, it's a very deep thing, but if anything, I think the much more valuable thing is just you kind of already know who the really great people are, and the question is like how can you build your whole organization around making it the right one for them to join.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The sort of a random story, but was reminded of this. I think we talked about it a couple of days ago, but Steve Jobs apparently called the original founder of Siri, like over 20 times. He called him every single day. He knew that he wanted Siri to be a part of Apple, and he just repeatedly called over and over and over and over and over and over, wouldn't stop until he finally said yes to joining. So, but I think something about it too is like, I think you said something which is like everybody knows who the best people are, but I actually think that's maybe only the case if you're also ultra
No, it's
elite.
easy. Hiring is easy. You just look up who's won an IMO gold medal. You hire all of them, and then you just raise a bunch of money, and then the rest is easy. It's super easy.
no, it's fair. It's fair. Yeah, you have to be in the right kind of circles and communities to know the best people. But I generally think that people spend relatively too much time, I think, on evaluating, people who are at the border versus like really just fighting for the absolute top tier of people. So
Yeah. It's always a mistake to think like, oh, this is like a B player. I can make them into an A player. Like there's just so much sweat there, and the math rarely works out. Usually, you're better just finding someone who's a great fit for your company, your team, the skills that they have, and you can just turn them loose and let them run, which is always the best. Anyway, I mean,
Lots going on.
Tons of news. Every company seems to have an AI coding agent. I want to know, how should I be thinking about the market? I was on X talking to some people. I'd kind of mapped it out as there is consumer code that is written when I just prompt O3. So the example I gave was I wanted to know how tall a desk was in an image. I uploaded the photo, and O3, without me asking it to write code, wound up writing a ton of image processing code in Python. I didn't say write code, it just wrote code for me. That's kind of autonomous AI coding. Now there's Codex, which feels more prosumer. I have a GitHub repo. I wanted to go fix a bug for me. Then there's something more on the enterprise side, like hands on the keyboard all day long. I need a super powered IDE. That's Windsurf Cursor. And then I'm seeing the top-down enterprise deals from companies like Cognition. So how is that the reasonable frame for thinking about the market? Or is it all just winner take all? Is there one market? Are there four? How are you thinking about it? And what are you seeing in the market these days?
Yeah, for sure. So high level breakdown. Look, I think there's a few different product experiences, and by the way, it's fun to see to see so many agents coming out this week. There's a few different product experiences, but I think there's primarily two markets is how we kind of think about it, and it's in one line, it's basically engineers and engineering teams versus non-engineers. I think the thing about it with DevTool, totally agree with your point, obviously, that there's some differences between enterprise and self-serve and so on. In practice, I mean, we have both businesses, for example, like, and a lot of these other players that you mentioned also have both businesses. In practice, I think what happens with developer tooling is, engineers are engineers, right? And so engineers are talking to the same people, the same people who are building their own projects at home are also going and, shipping pull requests and stuff at work. And there's kind of a lot of overlap in that space. And so there's kind of the I'll call it the like kind of like the app builder category of like, build me a simple app. And that's kind of like targeted towards, non-engineers today and giving them the ability to write software, build software, like you're kind of saving. And then there's engineers, which there are kind of some subcategories within, but I think for the most part, it's all connected much more so.
My current AGI test, I've moved the goalpost 25 times. I'm moving them again.
Yeah.
My current AGI goal is if I can go to Google's new Jules AI agent, and if I can with one prompt say build me Google Reader, and it does it, then AGI has arrived. That's my new goalpost.
Yeah, it's kind of insane if you think about so one of the things, there was some research that came out and kind of people did some statistical analysis. And
Hmm.
if you just look at, the length of time that an autonomous coding system can go
Mm.
in between every human intervention, it's kind of insane. It's doubled like every 3 months.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
it's like that's like 16x a year, and we've been doing this for a couple years now. So we're like, I mean, not that long ago, it was like a couple seconds at a time, and now you're doing hours of work, right? But it's like I just mentioned that because Google Reader is obviously is like a really great product. You have to imagine they put like a million hours into
Oh
that,
yeah,
right? And there will be
totally.
a point at which it is, that
One
window is just a
shotable.
million hours of work. But yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had Will Brown on the show, and he was saying that
How do you,
we have AGI, but I call it 15-minute AGI. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, you can go and
I
do
love it.
something,
Yeah.
but if it's a task that would take a human a week, it's not going to be one shotable in the traditional sense.
how
It's
do
single
you,
prompt.
how do you and the team think about the balance between wanting to create product experiences that somebody could just be like almost like a demo, right? Like somebody was posting yesterday that they like one
Yeah.
shotted a calendar app, and like that's like cool and exciting and all that, but maybe not massively valuable. But I'm
Yeah.
curious, do you guys have some sort of like internal framework for how you decide whether something is like really worth spending time on? Is it like a truly important problem, or is it just an opportunity just an opportunity to go viral and get attention, but doesn't create that enduring value?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, it's in the long term, our target has always been, let's do real engineering work that is, that teams are actually products that teams are really building out there in the real world. And I think the thing that's kind of interesting is yeah, because it is all, one group of people. I think it is the ability to build all these like cool things out does matter. It's we have a distinction internally where we call it street performer Devin. Basically, it's the
Hmm.
version of Devin, that where people are asking Devin to just do really cool stuff,
Yeah.
and it's something that we spend some time on, but obviously the core by far is really just like how do we have Devin solve real issues and real projects for your code base. Yeah.
Yeah, street performer. I like that. I do
Yeah.
wonder. So yeah, it feels like there's still two frames of mind. This consumer and enterprise, even for
Yeah.
stuff that I would call work. There's certain times when like I don't want to open an IDE or I don't have time in my day as a live streamer and someone who does most of their work over email and phone, more of like the executive role. I still will want an engineer to intermediate the products that I want to build. And I'm wondering if there's a timeline for when that stops happening or I start instantiating whole software products, this idea of like it feels like most of the time when you hear someone say, oh, I used AI and I vibe coded an app in the weekend, they're still a programmer and they're still running a business and they're still working on that 40 hours a week or something like that. But they're just getting a lot more leverage to this. I feel like the really cool moment that's maybe coming is when I actually say, I want Google Reader and it just builds it for me. And so in terms of shifting that enterprise experience of like real, not street performance, but real software into the consumer space, does that come top down or does that come bottom up from like the chat box that I'm already interacting with?
Yeah, and so I think both forms are going to happen in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that big companies are going to look. There's obviously always competitive pressures. There's a lot
Yep.
of relative things going on, and I think big companies that already have like software products that millions of people use. There's going to be a lot more onus on them to just make really really great software.
Mm-hmm.
It's I mean it's I keep track of this every day. When I'm doing things and I run into just bugs in software and the
Completely
stuff that I'm
agree.
using. It still happens all the
Yep.
time.
I
If we're
mean,
being
I mean,
real
let's
here.
let's let's be
Try and
honest.
book a flight.
X is the absolute worst culprit here. The amount I interact with more bugs on X than any other piece of software I use,
I
and I love
completely
X.
disagree. I mean, it's so much worse if you go and try and book a flight on the American Airlines app.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like
I
the
don't
bar's
know.
so
I don't know.
low.
I don't know. I
And
get.
so,
I get.
so
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
What
No,
was
go
that?
go.
No, I was gonna say, yeah. So that's that their like product quality is gonna have to get way way better there. I think the other side is also going to be true, which is individuals are going to be able to build cooler and cooler apps. But yeah, I mean, I think at the high level kind of general trend is as we're saying, as these tools get more and more autonomous, like you want to be able to just use them for longer and longer stretches of time, which is, I mean, which is pretty topical given all the agent launches that we've seen this past week. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to me about positioning against
Yeah.
Google's offering. My experience from as a consumer, I only interact with Google right now on the AI front as a consumer. Obviously,
Yeah.
I've like run ads on Google from a business perspective, but in general, I see a Gemini launch, and then as a consumer, it's very, very hard for me to access that product. I have
Yeah.
5 different Google accounts. I can never tell which one is on the Google AI premium tier. I finally got in. I got access to VO3. It was an incredible model. It felt like they were truly a step above, and there was kind of a ChatGPT style moment for video, that given that the audio comes through, it's super photorealistic. It's a great experience, and it justified me not only paying $500 a month, but going through the UX hurdle. Is the developer experience on the enterprise side dealing with Google similar, or are they more dialed in there because it's more important? Because I imagine that one of the advantages that you have as a startup in the enterprise sales space is that you can do founder-led sales. You can take the needs of the enterprise into account much more, different SLAs, more custom solutions. There's so many more things where you can iterate, even if Google is able to come out with something that is like, wow, okay, they're really good at research, but on the product side, maybe it's lacking.
Yeah. So it's, Google has Jules now. OpenAI has the Codex launch. GitHub is doing more with agents as well. And can I just tell you, I mean, it's we have always had the view that just like everybody's going to go do this eventually.
No, it'd be really bearish if everyone was like, oh no, Scott's like just kind of crazy. I don't know what he's up to. I don't think it's a good idea. It's like, no, you should inspire a bunch of people to be like, that's a good idea. We're going to do it too. And then you should still beat them.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like parallel asynchronous coding agents, it's been the core bet of our entire company basically for the last year and a half. And I think it's really interesting to see. Yeah. And so I think there are a few factors going on. Like I do think there will be multiple players, in the long term, but to your point, John, I mean, I think there's also just a lot of meaningful differentiation. I think the thing that's so interesting about the coding agent space is like, it is truly, you can kind of look at most spaces and kind of call it, I'll say like, this is a capability space, this is a product space, right? And to just give you a few examples, I would say, it's like image generation is like, sure, there's a lot of kind of like icing you can put on and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you just have a way better image generation model, that is the kind of the core, like that is the meat of what you're building, right? And like on other spaces, for example, like customer support or something like that, it's no one would disagree with you that the capabilities are there, and a lot of it is just like, what is the right interface for humans and AI to really work together and get that going? With coding agents, it is truly both, where it is, on the one hand, obviously, yeah, I mean, every IQ point really matters, in the system that you build, and every piece of data that it can use and analyze and works with, it really matters. And then on the other hand, it is, it's the software is just messy enough and deep enough that you do want to have a lot more control of what's going on. You want to be able to specify these details. You want to be able to check in and review the work yourself and all of these other things. And so there's a lot of deep work with interface. And it's I mean, in short, I think these are the kinds of problems that we've been thinking about for the last year, And so it's fun to see. And the fun thing too, actually, is like, I mean, we're up 30% week over week, actually, with just and I think there's kind of a funny thing, which is like, people know how to use chatbots, right? And it's like something that we've all kind of learned over the last couple of years. I think the agent form factor is just really different, right? And it's something that people have to learn and have to understand. And now that everybody's talking about agents, it's actually, it's actually been great for us. So
do you think deep research is part of that? Like, I feel like deep research for a lot of people is their first introduction to agentic AI, in the sense that it's like you fire it off and you let it go for 20 minutes and then you come back, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think the whole asynchronous kind of action is really like a big piece of it. And I think it's, we were talking about this last time, but it's like agents are going to be everywhere, pretty quickly. And
Hmm.
there's no reason you shouldn't have an agent who's, going and buying your flight so you don't have to go on the website yourself, or going and, all of these different things. And I think for a few reasons, code has kind of been the first place where that's really taken off. But yeah, yeah.
This is a total wild card, so feel free to pass if you haven't dug into it. But Ben Thompson was talking about the agentic web. We're talking about agents now. And he was kind of noodling through the idea that stable coins could be a relevant tool in the toolkit for the agentic web. As you ask, one of the examples was plan a birthday, and it's doing a lot of things online. Maybe it's buying birthday cards. It's also looking up a cake recipe and then printing that out. Well, that cake recipe website is monetizing with advertising right now. Stablecoins in the future, you could just pay a tenth of a cent for that page visit. Are you thinking about stable coins at all? Does that sound reasonable to you? Just if you noodle on it, how do you think about this stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think with, building software engineering agents, we're probably, on the further end of agents away from it. But with that
crypto
said,
pivot.
Yeah, not a lot of, I imagine that not a lot of customers are paying 1/10 of a cent for Devin right now. It's probably more in the hundreds
but with
of
that
dollars.
said, it is like an interesting thing, which is like maybe one way to put it is like a lot of the norms of the internet are going to have to change, right?
Sure.
We have captchas, for example, which is kind of how you prevent bots, and it's almost like captchas aren't really the right like system where you actually now want your agents to be able to go and like navigate on the internet and do things for you. And like a simple example of that for us is like, this is again totally unrelated to software engineering, but it's like, we give Devin our ramp card and then Devin just goes and orders groceries for us and stuff like that.
Really?
And it's like, yeah, it's great. But you can
amazing.
imagine, there's a lot of these systems of like, how should agents interact with money in the real world? How should they how can like products and websites and stuff have the right incentives if it's not humans that are going to them anymore, but agents and humans. And so, yeah, a lot of questions.
Has Devin ever missed a memo on a ramp receipt, or is Devin pretty good about that?
I think Devin's got it all down. Yeah, Devin takes screenshots and stuff as well, so it's all,
How are you thinking about the sort of stack, right? Because I know you guys have a partnership with Linear. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we work with Linear. There's this idea that much like a member of like a team, an agent can kind of appear in a lot of different places, right? A teammate can be in the office, they can be in a Zoom call, they can be in Slack, whatever. And how are you thinking about kind of like agentic kind of like orchestration, right? And sort of managing agents?
Yeah. Linear is, and by the way, they just had a launch this week. They had launched this
Today.
morning, actually. So shout out to the Linear team. And yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, speaking of this kind of like product interface question, right? A lot of the work that you have to do is really like, it is I think one of the big difference between chatbots and agents is an agent is truly like, it truly needs to be like basically an employee in the same way. It is really like you as an engineer are using your team of junior buddies who are going to go and like implement this stuff for you, right? And so like a lot of what that means is it has to be in all of these same systems, in order to work really cleanly. And like the standard workflows that we have, I mean, we have Slack, for example, we have Linear and Jira and so on, but it is a big part of it. Yeah.
Last question, actually from your post, you asked for questions from people who follow you, and Remy Olson asked a great one. What do you see as the primary limiting factor for coding agents between context window, reasoning, which I imagine is just the amount of inference you're delivering to reasoning tokens, managing complex environments, or other things?
Yeah, I think of those, I would say managing complex environments is probably the biggest one, in the sense that, look, if you like, speaking of 15-minute AGI, if you give it like a very contained coding problem where it's just like, all right, write one file of code that solves this thing, it's honestly, it's already insanely good.
Sure.
AI is already basically there, I would say, on that. I think that the areas where you see these agents or models in general like really slip up is kind of stuff where like you actually just need outside information to go and do what you're doing. It's like the simple examples are, if you're fixing bugs or you're implementing things, like you want to be able to go and test the code yourself. This is a big part of why connecting with all these systems is so important. And so, plugging into Slack or Linear, for example, makes it really easy for you to kick off your Devon runs or whatever it is. But I think a big part of it too is like, if you guys are actually doing your issue tracking in linear, or if you guys are, this is how you do front end deploys and this is how you run the linter or something like that, it is obviously, the agent is going to be super handicapped if it doesn't have access to the same things. And
Totally.
it's, the next step beyond that obviously is not just accessing those things, but learning how to really intelligently work with these and use them to make decisions.
Any reaction to the Llama 4 behemoth? I think I saw 10 million token context window. Seems bigger than ever. At the same time, kind of been going back and forth on how that project is progressing. There's been kind of mixed reactions online. What's been your takeaway from that?
Yeah, there's a lot of cool projects working on longer context windows. I would just kind of give as one point, which is it's interesting. If you think about human thought, which is not always the best parallel, but is obviously is the one example that we do have. Humans actually have terribly small context windows. It's like when you get like the 6-digit code, it's like I don't know, it's like pretty hard to remember what the 6 digits were and type those in. So your context is
goldfish mode.
Yeah. Even with coding, it's like once you have to remember like the 3 different files that it takes you a while to spin up the context window, and then you don't want to get pulled out of coding. You want to be in the flow, right?
And so the thing that humans are like really good at, I would say, is almost more like intelligent retrieval, right? To your point, which is like you pull up this file and you're looking at it and you're like, oh yeah, I remember why we did this like 2 months ago. And then you're kind of like, you can kind of like replay it in your head almost. And that's kind of the thing that's really interesting. I don't think it's so I guess a long story short is like, I think long context is going to help a ton. It's going to make things a lot better. But I think there are some kind of like fundamental things of like, how do you access all of the information that you need access to make this decision that's right in front of you right now, which is like context alone doesn't solve that problem.
Sure. Basically. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was fantastic chat. We'd love to talk to you again soon. This was great. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon.